FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 3/27/20. Well, as things spiral out of control, coronavirus, no signs yet of abating here in the U.S., but there is reason to expect it might in the not too distant future, or at least we'll see the flattening of the so-called curve. Well, the government just passed a huge stimulus package, $2 trillion. So our advice is don't worry, the government is here to help. And here to help us uncover this is Sam McElroy. But first, as always, email us with your questions, your concerns, your opinions. What do you think this stimulus is going to do? Will it be the first of many? The email address kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, Sam, thanks for being back. So we got a $2 trillion stimulus and everything is great, right?
If only it were that easy. But, we're in a situation, and even though, we've been in similar, let's say, situations to some extent, we're in somewhat of uncharted territories. And I guess maybe anytime you have a major event like this, you end up in uncharted territories. But one of the things that's really interesting to me about what's going on right now is that there's 2 components to it. We have the social aspect of all the things that people are going on. So the quarantines, the being stuck inside, the lack of social interaction. And then we have the financial aspect of it. And one of the things that we're seeing is, that there's obviously the immediate financial impact, let's say for workers and businesses and stuff like that. But I think further on we go, further in the year, we're going to see the expanding financial impact. So, earlier, let's say this week, we saw Wall Street respond positively to the stimulus package that was put out, because I think maybe it started to assuage some of the fears of total economic stoppage. But now the question is it really going to do its job? And at the end of the day, stimulus packages, though they're often necessary when the economy really runs into tough sledding, isn't really the way that you want to see economic growth. So we have to really balance out what the ripple effects are going to be and what all this is going to mean in the future, the longer we go.
Yeah. So is the stimulus the way to go for economic growth? Normally, when the government spends money, they do it very inefficiently. The least efficient players get the biggest slice of the pie. And where does that leave us?
Yeah, I think the issue that you have with a lot of stimulus packages or a lot of stimulus, bills is that, there's this feeling, and I don't want to oversimplify it. It's a tough job for all the people in positions of authority to try to figure out what to do. But to kind of add my 2 cents worth, one of the issues is that there's this thinking that if there's just more money out there, if they make money more readily available, that will keep the economy going because people will go spend the money. And I think what we see historically is that that's only partially true. Yeah, it's true that, businesses that want to stay, in business are going to use maybe some stimulus and some money to continue their business operations because they have a desire to stay in business. But the part that we often underestimate is the psychological aspects of all this stuff. Anytime people are uncertain about their future and what their future may hold, there's a tendency to want to hoard. So, when you get money out to corporations or to businesses or to individuals, but the certainty of the future is still really murky, it doesn't necessarily mean that those people are going to turn around and take that money and dump it back into the economy and start spending as if everything's okay. And I think that's the part that maybe becomes kind of difficult in these types of situations.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the people's inclination is times are tough. We don't want to spend. And that's kind of like China trying to redirect their consumption to domestic away from being an export economy. People just don't want to do it because there is no safety net there. And they know that if when it hits the fan, they're basically on their own. Yet here in the United States, people believe that somehow the government is going to save them.
Yeah. And I don't know if people really believe that the government's going to save them. I think that people are kind of panicking in a lot of different areas, and their feeling is that something is better than nothing. But I think if we talk to the average worker and say, now that the stimulus bill is passed, where's your fear, on the dial right now? If they were at a 10 before, maybe they're at like an 8 now. So I don't know that people are feeling like everything is okay, but at least it's something. And I think maybe that's what we're starting to see. I'll give you an example. It came out, earlier that there was going to be suspension of interest on federal loans for student loans. Mm-hmm. And, the thinking behind that, and I would agree, just in our own practice in terms of dealing with a lot of younger individuals, I would say yes. Student loans is something that makes it very hard for younger people, I'm finding, to be able to really advance. And that doesn't mean that I'm advocating that we just get rid of all student loans. I'm just saying that, yes, I understand that it is an issue, something that's going to have to be talked about and dealt with. I see it every single day. And I think the idea is, okay, well, if we suspend the interest from accruing on student loans, then it gives people some relief maybe from, them having to make those student loan payments, and they can do other things, maybe even suspend payments, go into forbearance or something like that, and maybe have interest accruing. But it's not like, somebody who's 28 years old is sitting at home saying, okay, well, if I calculate my student loans, the interest that I pay each month is $200. So now I don't have to pay that interest. So now I can go spend that $200 somewhere else. They're just simply not doing that. So it's great that maybe, while people are going through this financial struggle that they are right now, that they're getting some relief. But it's not like they're going to sit there and quantify this and then turn around and say, well, then that means that I can order out food 2 more times this week or something like that. You're not going to see that direct translation into production, into GDP, I guess, is where it all comes down to it. I think the main thing that we need to be focusing on is how you keep the main engine going, how you make sure that businesses are able to continue growing and generating revenue. What you really want to stop is escalating unemployment in the future. And to the degree that we can keep the basic tenets of the economy kind of functioning and working, keep people employed, stop small businesses from having to close up shop or go out of business, eventually, I believe, science or whatever we're doing, whether it's social distancing, but all these different measures together will come up with a solution. Like you said, the wave will flatten in terms of new cases being reported. We'll get a handle on this thing, but you want to make sure that when you come out the other side, that the wheels haven't come off from an economic standpoint. To the degree that we can do that, I think that it may help the recovery be a little easier.
Yeah, and I hope you're right. But this is a real disaster, and you can't understate that. You can't overemphasize it enough. And the fact is, like you said, there's a limit to what the government really can do to stoke demand. And really, is what they're doing here helicopter money? Is that really the best way to go about it?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. At Silver One's Candelaria Mine project in Nevada, there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver, which Silver One is developing and advancing. The company's Phoenix Silver project, located within the Arizona Silver Belt, is an early-stage exploration project on which native silver vein fragments have been discovered near surface. One grab sample assayed an astounding 14,688 ounces per ton. Yes, that's right, ounces, not grams. Silver One has tremendous exploration potential, is extremely leveraged to the price of silver, and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah, I think you're kind of hitting on a big piece here, which is that from a financial or economic standpoint, I don't know that the government really has a whole bunch of tools that they can whip out and fix everything. I think that when you're in a capitalist-driven economy, you have to then, at the end of the day, rely on that system to be able to self-adjust and to be able to pull itself kind of through it. So the government can provide a spark. The government can provide some easing of tension to make things a little bit easier, but they can't in and of themselves create economic activity out of the blue without ripple effect. One of the things I think we're all kind of looking at is, just in the garden variety sense, if there is such a thing, it's probably near impossible at this point that we avoid as a country going into recession. I just don't see with the economic slowdown and stoppage how Q1 and Q2 are going to be anywhere close to Q4 of last year. I think that's just kind of the reality that maybe we're heading for. And I think recession has become almost like this fear-based word, when really recessions are just normal economic cycles. The market has always moved through this biorhythm of expansion and contraction. So it's not anything that we have to fear in the sense of doing everything humanly possible to avoid it. In fact, I think some of the preventative measures that we did last year has now kind of boxed us into a corner this year. And if interest rates have already gone to about 0%, then what's next is obviously negative interest rates. And I don't know if that's really where we want to go, but I don't know if there's really many tools left with the Fed in terms of what they can do. So I think it's about them trying to do something that maybe calms all of our fears to some degree, because I think the more that we panic, the more we create or make the problem exponentially larger. But I also think it's about them maybe trying to assist in the process. Make it a little bit easier to do business, make it a little easier to keep employees, but it's not going to be all on them to make sure that this thing works.
And what about the stimulus for small business? That's really unparalleled before in American history. We never saw massive subsidies going to this many companies, many people at one time before. Not just the big companies getting the bailout, but people were very upset before that the big banks got the bailout and the middle class was left hanging from a string. And so is this an attempt to actually remedy that, or is it just trying to buy off our peace and acquiescence to bail out the likes of Boeing, who put themselves in this situation by massive stock buybacks for the past 10 years? Since 2012, they bought back $45 billion of their stock. They could have built a replacement 737. They knew the airframe was outdated. They knew it. And yet they just chose to keep upgrading it. And now we are where we are now.
Yeah, I think that this is something that may actually be on the right track. See, I feel like when you give tax cuts or you give financial incentives to really large corporations, I think one of the reasons that you don't really see the end result from that in terms of, more people being hired and, higher wages and some of these other issues, from a psychological standpoint, I think larger corporations are more susceptible to groupthink. In a sense, when you get a whole bunch of brains together in these really large companies, it becomes really easy to make analytical decisions without the human component of other people. Whereas when you have a small business, and let's say that, there's 10 employees and they all know each other and the owner is friends with all the people, I think that there's an incentive for them to personally want to see their employees do well. And if they can sacrifice to be able to not have to let an employee glow, I think you'll see that more in a small business than you will in a major corporation that at the end of the day is going to justify their decisions by saying, well, if it ends up being better for shareholders, this is the way the game is played. What choice do we have? So I actually think trying to do something for small businesses is probably where things ought to be directed. I haven't had a chance to really dig through all the fine details of what the stimulus package, looks like. And they always say that, it's in the details that you got to kind of go through this stuff to see what impact it's really going to have. But at first glance, I would say that, trying to do something to help small businesses keep their employees and keep their doors open is probably where you want to direct some of this energy.
Yeah, and that does make a lot more sense than giving it to a Boeing. But on the other hand, if Boeing goes bankrupt, that will cause thousands of other companies that supply to them to go bankrupt. That will lead to more unemployment. Same with the car companies. That was the rationale for bailing them out last time.
Yep.
And really, like, Sam, who's going to be buying a car right now? Unless you've got like a lot of extra cash and you want to get a good deal, what's the point?
Right. Yeah, I think that there is no easy answer. And I guarantee you, if you get 10 economists in the room, you're going to have 5 on one side and 5 on another side in terms of how you actually do this. Because you're right. When large corporations go under and it's not because a similar corporation can take them over and they're going to try to keep them, mostly whole. But when it goes under and people are laid off and there's a ripple effect in the supply chain because all the people that then service them and the customers of those corporations now are missing a big component, that does have an impact also. But just because corporations are really, really big doesn't mean that they should get a free pass simply because they're so big and they have such a big impact on other people. I think that if things can be structured in a way where it helps them to help themselves, I think that's great. But if we come in and say, because you're so big, we just simply are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you keep going, I think that's when you start to run into issues, because it's almost like when you're raising a child. When there's no clear boundaries and there's no real punishment or effect for mistakes, then you teach the kid that really they can do whatever they want, even if you threaten them, because at the end of the day, you're not going to hold them to it. And I think that that's the fine line from a business world that we kind of have to walk sometimes, that, at the end of the day, if you have a capitalist society where businesses come and go all the time, that you let that play out to create more efficiencies in the market. And so that means some businesses are going to make it and some aren't going to make it. Now, in that, when there's major events like what we're going through right now, you don't just be heartless and say, well, hopefully you have enough reserves. And for those of you companies that don't have enough reserves, I guess you're just going to die. It's okay to try to provide some assistance to either make things easier for them temporarily, to provide some temporary relief so that they can try to help themselves. But at the end of the day, it's got to be support to allow the business or the individual to help themselves. It can't just be coming in and doing it for them.
Right. And that makes total sense. The whole thing about the virus, I mean, it is serious. I'm not downplaying its seriousness, but is it really a cause for global financial panic and shutdown?
It's hard to say. And I'm, I'll add my disclaimer and say I'm not a scientist. So believe me, I know that I don't understand pandemics and all those other pieces. I think that I, like a lot of people, are somewhat confused because there's so many differing opinions. You have some people that are saying, if you look at it by the numbers, realistically, there's more people that die from the flu every year than from the coronavirus. There's other people that look at it and say, but the mortality rate's a lot higher with this thing. And if you let it spread the way that other viruses do, you're going to be looking at escalating deaths and all those other issues. I don't know enough about the science to really say which one really makes sense. What I would say is that from what I'm seeing right now, I think that it's serious. I think people are dying from it. And I think that it's incumbent on us to try to do what we can to get rid of it. At the same time, I think that it's the way that things are coming out that's creating more of the fear, that's creating the panic. So I'll talk about, here in Illinois, 1 minute you'd have people say, if you come in close contact or if you think you have it, self-quarantine yourself for 14 days. And then all the things started changing, don't get together in groups of more than 1,000, then 500, then 250, then 150. And now it's down to 10. It'll come in contact with anyone. So it's the constant changing. And then the schools being closed, and you think you're going to be closed for a week or 2 weeks, but then they're closed for a month. And I've heard in other places, like I believe in Virginia, they've already canceled school for the rest of the year. So it's all these varying opinions and things literally changing day to day. Human beings don't like uncertainty. That's just the way we are. I want to be able to plan my life, and I want to be able to plan for what I'm going to do this week, next week, and the next month. And when I feel like something is outside of my control and I don't know what I'm going to be allowed to do, and I don't know what my life is going to look like, that creates more of the fear than just the disease in and of itself. And when we start acting out of the fear, that's when we're really starting to see irrational or indiscriminate selling in the markets. People aren't even looking at what a good investment is anymore. They're just hitting the panic sell button on everything. Mm-hmm. And that's common, I guess, when there's fear out there. But it means that things were moving so quickly that people couldn't even do analysis. They couldn't sit down and take a breather and say, okay, which industry is going to be impacted? And in that industry, which specific companies are better than others? When you go back and you look at the cash flow analysis, there are some companies that have enough cash on hand to where if there was total economic stoppage for a year, they'd still be able to pay all their operating expenses and all their dividends and all their interest and all this other stuff. But they're down just as much as corporations that'll be out of business in a couple of months, because we're indiscriminately treating everybody as if they're the same, not taking the time to really catch our breath and assess the situation. And I'm not saying that to blame anybody. I'm saying that because I understand that when things really move this quickly, sometimes it's hard to really make sense of it all. And I think that fear-based behavior is almost as big of a problem as the actual, fear that maybe the disease, instilled in and of itself, just because of how it's spreading and the mortality rates that go with it.
Right. Yep. Couldn't agree with you more. And Sam, so, hey, we got to wrap up, but just tell us where's the best place to find you, connect with you on the web and all that?
Yeah, the easiest place is always on our website. It's just www.atfinancial.com. So www.atfinancial.com.
All right. Excellent. And there's a link in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Send us your emails, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @kerrylutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. And of course, our home website, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for your free newsletter. Sam, always appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.